Vast domes, star forts, cathedrals, and orphan buildings with no records or architects. Think of history like overlapping signal waves of symbols. Lion serpent equals political, religious dominance and deception. Eagle, recurring cycles of prophetic renewal and spiritual ascent. Composite beings, encoded truths in symbolic Gnostic texts. Kingdom, Christ's sovereign rule, historically obscured. Eschatology, urgency of final judgment narratives. From 70 to 1070 AD, the millennium, texts, including Gnostic codices, apocalyptic writings, and alternative theologies, preserved truths indirectly. These acted like encrypted memory banks. After 1070 AD, Satan loosed, suppression intensified. The Index Librorum Prohibitorum and inquisitorial actions systematically erased or banned writings that challenged papal authority, alternate chronologies, or millenarian expectations. Thus, the patterns of banned works map directly onto Revelation 20, verse 7 to 10. After restraint, deception spreads. Competing timelines, alternate cosmologies, and kingdom theology are erased to maintain control. What remains is a curated, deceptive history. Every heretical document, whether Wycliffe's Bible, Gnostic Gospels, or apocalyptic prophecies, was suppressed because it pointed to a timeline where Christ reigned and papal power was false. Put simply, the banning of books wasn't random. It was the exact way Satan's little season deception worked, making one false history appear to be the only history.
Let's build a catalog of apocryphal passages that directly touch on time, rulers, deception, and hidden kingdoms, so we can compare them with Revelation 20, verse 7 to 10, Satan loosed for a little season, final deception and judgment. 1. Apocryphon of John, Nag Hammadi. Passages. Yaldabaoth, the lion serpent demiurge, claims dominion over time and creation. Archons deceive humanity into forgetting their true origin. Parallel to Rever 20, suggests a false ruler loosed for a season, ruling history under deception, encodes the idea of counterfeit chronology. Archons manipulate memory and records. 2. Enoch, Slavonic Enoch. Passages. World history described in 7,000-year cycles, each era ruled by angelic or demonic overseers. Final age is short, mirroring the little season when evil reasserts itself. Parallel, the millennium, 1,000 years of reign, followed by a short deceptive period, fits this cyclical pattern, provides a framework for a hidden timeline within supposed continuous history. 3. Apocalypse of Peter. Passages. Graphic descriptions of judgment and rewards. Mentions that some false Christians prosper temporarily until they are exposed. Parallel. Reflects the idea that during the kingdom, counterfeit believers existed but were restrained until loosing, Rever 20, verse 7 to 10. Number 4, Ascension of Isaiah. Passages. Describes Belial, Satan, descending to earth, ruling through earthly kingdoms in disguise. Christ descends and ascends through multiple heavens, each layer guarded by rulers who distort divine light. Parallel. Suggests Satan's loosing involves controlling political religious systems through deception, not brute force. Supports a hidden kingdom model where Christ reigns but is obscured by counterfeit rule. 5. Ophite diagrams and magical papyri. Passages. Complex cosmograms show a serpent encircling the world, lions guarding gates, and composite beings at thresholds. Represent rulers of time, fate, and false aeons. Parallel. Encodes the release of serpent-lion figures, Archon Satan, during a short period when they could deceive the nations. Could map onto altered chronology and symbolic suppression. Palmer 6. Gospel of Mary. Passages. Disciples argue about authority. Peter versus Mary. Jesus reveals visions of ascending past powers of wrath, desire, ignorance, envy. Parallel. Indicates disputes over true leadership were suppressed. Suggests that during the kingdom, rival claims arose, later feeding into the deception after 1070 AD. 7. Pistis Sophia. Passages. Sophia is trapped by lion-faced rulers who withhold light. Time is segmented into periods of release and captivity. Parallel. Matches Rever 20's motif of Satan restrained, then loosed. Suggests the little season is when archons regain power over souls and history. Patterns across Apocrypha. 1. False rulers, lion serpent archons, Satan's loosing. 2. Time cycles and hidden ages equals altered chronology, phantom time. 3. Short final period of deception equals Rev 27's little season. 4. Suppression of voices, Mary, Sophia, concealment of true kingdom memory. Together, these apocryphal passages reinforce the idea that the millennium happened and was suppressed, that what John saw in Rev 20, verse 7 to 10, Satan loosed briefly, was allegorically encoded in early heretical writings, which the church later banned or marginalized. Rev 20, verse 7 to 10 framework. Millennium, 70 to 1070 AD. 2 Enoch, Apocalypse of Peter, Ophite diagrams, Gospel of Mary. Texts with cycles, composites, hidden authority disputes. Satan loosed, 1070 AD onward. Ascension of Isaiah, Apocryphon of John, Pistis Sophia. Texts with lion serpent rulers, Belial, Sophia oppressed, deception unleashed. This shows that the symbolic focus of Apocrypha lines up with the hidden millennium theory. Millennial texts encode suppressed truth, while post-millennium writings warn of deception and loosed powers. Pre-Nicene era, 2nd, 3rd C. Some fathers, e.g. Irenaeus Papias, held millennial kingdom views that resemble covenant eschatology, literal reign, Israel church transition. Council of Nicaea, 325 AD, emphasis shifted towards spiritualizing prophecy, chiliasm, literal millennium branded suspect. 2. Medieval suppression. Augustinian dominance, Augustine's city of God reframed the millennium as symbolic, church age equals kingdom. This theology became official Catholic doctrine. Papal position, anything suggesting a literal 70 to 1070 millennium or post-70 AD fulfillment was treated as heresy. Tools of suppression, anathemas, eschatologies outside the realized kingdom model declared heretical. Scribes and glosses, allegorization inserted into commentary traditions. Number 3, Index Librorum Prohibitorum, 1546, Council of Trent onward, eschatological works outside papal orthodoxy increasingly censored. Banned suspect works, Joachim of Fiore, d. 1202, Three Ages, Father, Son, Spirit, condemned as millenarian. Early Protestant reformers, Luther, Calvin, often accused Rome of deliberately hiding covenantal fulfillment. Heretical. Apocrypha and apocalyptic commentaries marginalized in scholarship. Number 4. Jesuit counter-theologies, futurism. Francisco Ribera, 1585, shifted revelation into far future events. Preterism, Luis de Alcazar, 1614, confined prophecy to 1st century. Purpose, neutralize Protestant historicist readings that saw papacy as Antichrist. Result, covenant eschatology, which sees the kingdom beginning in 70 AD and continuing literally, became squeezed out, neither fully futurist nor fully preterist. Number 5. Long-term effect. Historiography shaped, Middle Ages reframed as Dark Ages rather than potential millennium. Archaeological silence, selective emphasis on pagan Rome, suppression of covenant-based kingdom models. Survivors, only fragments remain in apocryphal texts, heretical writings, and heterodox mystical traditions. The papacy systematically suppressed covenantal eschatology by 1. Replacing literal millennial hope with Augustinian allegory. 2. Censoring prophetic and apocalyptic works. 3. Deploying futurism, preterism as theological smokescreens. 4. Controlling historiography to erase the memory of a literal kingdom, 70 to 1070.
Christ's message wasn't about a distant, future event but an imminent, impending reality. He promised to prepare mansions, in John chapter 14 verse 2, not for a far-off eternity, but for his immediate return so the saints could begin to rule over many, as described in Revelation chapter 20 verse 4. This physical, earthly kingdom, the holy city, New Jerusalem, described in Revelation chapter 21 verse 2, literally descended from God out of heaven to begin its reign in 70 AD. During the 200 years of Hebrew enslavement in Egypt, any pharaoh would have boasted of their monumental achievements, yet the pyramids are not a product of their human hands. These colossal structures are, in fact, part of a later, divine plan, a celestial design manifested on earth. The prophecy in Isaiah chapter 19 verse 19, "In that day shall there be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof to the Lord," foretells the divine purpose of these seemingly man-made wonders.
The Great Pyramid of Giza was originally covered in smooth white Tura limestone casing stones, reflecting sunlight like a shining beacon. Most of these were removed over centuries, especially after earthquakes in the 14th century. Much of the casing stone was repurposed into mosques and structures in Cairo, such as the Mosque of Sultan Hassan. Ancient monuments, including the pyramids, obelisks, and temples, were frequently altered, stripped, or reinscribed by later rulers. In Egyptian religion, recarving names or removing outer layers symbolically erased the original authority.
What history has labeled the Dark Ages is, in reality, the literal 1,000-year reign of Christ, a historical period deliberately and meticulously hidden from our common understanding. The Great Pyramid, a perfect form that descended from heaven, stands as a silent, physical witness to this truth. It has endured through the ages, not as a tomb, but as a monument to testify to the reality of the literal, earthly rule of Christ. The Index Librorum Prohibitorum, established in the 16th century, was a key tool for the Catholic Church to maintain control over teaching and history. By the mid-20th century, the explosion of literacy and widespread biblical translations made enforcing this censorship increasingly difficult. The Church could no longer keep Scripture under lock and key. 2. The role of the Second Vatican Council, 1962 to 1965. The Second Vatican Council was a pivotal event that redefined the Church's relationship with the modern world. It introduced reforms like Mass in local languages and an emphasis on freedom of conscience. The abolition of the Index in 1966 was a direct result of this council. This move wasn't a surrender of control but a strategic shift from overt censorship to using soft power, influencing institutions like seminaries and academic faculties. 3. Analysis. Why 1966 specifically? Several factors made 1966 the strategic moment for this change. Jesuit influence. The Jesuit order had strategically embedded themselves in global politics, education, and intelligence circles. By this time, their influence was so vast that a formal book ban was no longer necessary to control the narrative. The universities themselves served as gatekeepers. The control was so complete that, as some claim, it fulfilled the essence of the Jesuit oath, to infiltrate institutions and guide thought from within. Shift in academic power. By the 1950s and 1960s, secular universities had become dominant in biblical criticism and history. The Church no longer feared individuals reading the Bible, because the dominant academic consensus had already marginalized covenant eschatology and other forms of preterism as fringe theories. Resistance fatigue. The Protestant Reformation had fractured into thousands of denominations, most adopting futurist or dispensationalist eschatology. This effectively neutralized the one theological view, covenant eschatology, that could truly undercut papal legitimacy. The unified threat the resistance once posed had dissolved. Cold War politics. The Vatican sought to position itself as a modern and credible moral partner against communism. Ending the Index was a strategic public relations move that helped it gain credibility with Western powers. 4. Judicial finding. The lifting of the Index was not a concession of defeat, but a declaration of victory in shaping consensus. By 1966, the papacy no longer feared individual Bible ownership because the interpretive frameworks, such as dispensational futurism and liberal theology, already dominated theological discourse. The biggest threat to its authority, covenant eschatology, was effectively buried under academic dismissal and denominational fragmentation. 5. Closing statement. The abolition of the Index in 1966 was an act of strategic confidence, not kindness. The Vatican determined that the Jesuits had infiltrated academia and politics deeply enough to control narratives without censorship. The Protestant resistance was fractured and no longer a unified threat. The papacy's legitimacy was no longer endangered by Bible ownership because interpretive consensus had already shifted in its favor. It was strategy, not surrender.
70 AD, destruction of Jerusalem, beginning of Christ's kingdom reign, millennium. Revelation 20, Satan bound. True kingdom imagery dominates. 70 to 1070 AD, the millennium. Christ reigns, kingdom truths encoded, Gnostic texts, apocalyptic writings. Eschatology urgency dips. Less need when Christ is reigning. Composite beings in texts preserve symbols of the kingdom. 1070 AD, loosing of Satan. Revelation 27:10, Satan released, deception spreads, rise of papal power, inquisition, book burnings, suppression of alternate chronologies, apocalyptic writings, and covenant eschatology. Index Librorum Prohibitorum established, 1559, formalized book banning to maintain control. Medieval early modern suppression, 1070 to 1966, serpent and lion, papacy plus monarchy, dominate. Jesuit order rises, 1540s, infiltration of education, politics, and missions. Protestants resist, Wycliffe, Huss, Luther, but resistance fractures into denominations. Futurism and historicism replace preterist covenant eschatology in mainstream theology. 1966. Abolition of the Index. Vatican declares censorship unnecessary. Reason, academic consensus already shaped. Futurism, allegory, secular biblical criticism. Jesuits dominate universities and politics. Resistance fractured. Covenant eschatology sidelined as fringe. Judicial-style verdict, confidence, not charity. Global consensus shifts. Papal authority no longer visibly questioned. Christians, Jews marginalized in mainstream academia. Benstein's expelled. Philip Haney's see something, say nothing. Catholic Church rocked by child sexual abuse scandals. Billions spent in settlements. Over $5 billion in the U.S., 2004-2023. Public credibility shaken, but narrative control intact. Prophetic alignment with Revelation 27-10. Satan shall be loosed, deceive the nations. Book banning replaced by cultural consensus and academic dismissal. Every banned or heretical text equals competing timeline or challenge to papal authority. By 1966, the papacy judged it had succeeded in reshaping history so thoroughly that Bible ownership itself was no longer a threat. In short, the index's end in 1966 equals proof of the deception's maturity. The serpent and lion no longer needed book bans because deception had become consensus.